I'm good. I'm fine.
Testing, testing.
I already checked.
Hi, good morning. Will all the legislators please come to the dais so we can get started? morning, everyone. We're going to get started. I'd ask members of the legislature and everyone in attendance in the chamber to please rise as we do the Pledge of Allegiance. Deputy Presiding Officer, would you please lead us?
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Chairman. Budget Review Committee, Kevon Abrahams. Here. Thank you. Arnold Drucker. Here. John Ferretti.
Here.
Howard Copel. Here. Chairman Michael Giangagorio.
Here.
We have a quorum, sir.
Thank you very much. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's hearing of the Budget Review Committee, the subject of which is the official close of fiscal year 2022 and 2023 fiscal mid-year report. I'd like to acknowledge the attendance of Budget Director Andrew Persick and their teams, and thank you for your contributions. Proceeding with item number 1, Mr. Persick, please begin your presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for hearing us today. I'd like that my team next to me is Chris Nolan, Irfan Qureshi, and Irina Siddiqui. And my team upstairs who is not here. I couldn't do a lot of this work without them, so I have to thank them before we even get started. Closer. Can you hear it better? Okay. So, as the tides would turn, the county's fiscal position, as we all are aware, has made a monumental upgrade to where it was 5 years ago. The county is probably in the best fiscal position it's been in many years, but we still have challenges that present itself in front of us right now, and there are many of those out there, but we'll get to that in the middle of the presentation. If you go to the first slide, I'm going to go over this. This is how we know we're on the uptick. We've gotten 4 bond upgrades over the past couple years, which is telling the investor market that the county has definitely made substantial strides in fixing its fiscal position. That's reflective in some of the rating upgrades we've got. Moody's went from an A1 to an A3 this year. Standard & Poor's gave us a AA-, and Fitch upgraded us to A+. So we have in the eyes of the world out there, which is somehow how we measure ourselves, meaning myself and the financial world, have made significant strides in the fiscal position of the county. So I'm going to do 2022, and then I'll get into 2023, and then some of the things, the challenges we'll be facing in 2024. But let me start with that the county finished with a positive operating fund balance of $42.2 million as compared to $31 in 2021. That said, we moved some money into reserves strategically, which have been allocated to address the existing liabilities out there. If not for these reserves, we'd put a strain on the taxpayers, which we get some significant judgments and anything out there. Some of the challenges I will say right now, outside of, while sales tax is plugging along, I will say litigation is probably one of the biggest risks we have out there right now. Some of the size of the judgments that are coming out of the courts have been significant, which is good and bad. I mean, and that becomes problematic for us with some of the positions we're in. So that's one of the guarded things we need to be cognizant of, that some of the things that we're getting judicial verdicts on are significant. So we have to keep that in the back of our minds. The other challenges we have coming ahead is, as everybody knows, the real estate market has taken a left turn here, or a downward turn, which we're not seeing significant revenues coming in, even from mortgage recording and everything else. Forget about the fee problem that we had with the GIS tax map. We're having a volume decrease, and that's creating a little hole in the budget. That said, there's an upside to the investment income because of the cash position that we have, so we're kind of offsetting that and managing that. But just to give you a bellwether where we're at, and we're starting to see inflation have some problems and some uptick in caseloads in certain of the social service and health human services arena. So with that said, I'm going to go through how 2020, where we are in our strongest financial position in years. We've had several consecutive years of surpluses, strong cash position, which is a big thing because we're not doing any short-term borrowings anymore. We've mitigated that, which has, it's a benefit to us because our debt service has dropped as a result of that because we're not doing short-term borrowings. And this highly increasing rate market, it's beneficial that we're not going out to the market right now because it's so volatile out there, especially in the fixed income market. We have to be cautious of, how we do things and how we spend the cash and watch the cash flows. But right now we're in a very, very good position. And this administration has taken lots of pride in keeping the expenses down and under control. So I will say that we've made monumental steps, and the county's position is much better than I've been sitting here when I first started here. So, and we could all attest that. And that's between the work of the administration and this body who's made this turnaround into something that we can probably talk about. So 2022 finished with approximately $26 million in surplus, which fell into the fund balance. Majority of that was mostly from, I would say, from sales tax and some expense savings and debt service and other, which probably be money that we allocated for tax certs and judgments and claims that we didn't pay out, but we put that money into a bucket in the reserve. So that's going to be the plan going forward, meaning we had excess appropriations in the operating budget, and we transferred those monies into the reserves that we have out there for certs and litigation liability. We've also moved some money around just to cover ourselves for the future. So departmental revenues are still struggling, I will say that much. In certain arenas, as I covered with the real estate market and some other things. Our red light camera program, which is another thing we're starting to see, if behavior returns to where it was pre-pandemic, we will start seeing an uptick again, which we're starting to see, especially in traffic out there. If anybody's been driving lately, you can see that we're back almost normal. The traffic is getting bad, so I think that's, good and bad. Driver behavior and everything else probably, is one of the main drivers. You get a young kid who doesn't know read the sign like my kid wouldn't, and they make the right on red without stopping. But that said, I think those are the struggles we will be facing. We also have to incorporate the fact that we are going to have problems. Our debt load is going up, but as a result of that, because of the ratings, we're being in a better place. But we also have to be cognizant that this increasing rate environment is putting a lot of stress on what the debt service payments will be going in the future. So we're sizing, we're managing, our capital budget to see when the immediate needs are and to get that money into the proper places for what we need. Our infrastructure, one of the things we can say is that we've turned the page as far as not borrowing for operating funds. So now we're concentrating on building back up our infrastructure, which has been somewhat neglected, and we're putting a lot of money into that. And I think that's very important because the county, has valuable assets that need to maintain between sewers, some of the buildings that we have to provide the services and everything else, and to provide the residents with paving roads and everything else that we may need to do. So we're back on a schedule, I will say, of improving the county's infrastructure. So I'm going to flip to the sales tax page. I just want to tell you where we finished and where we're at. Again, we had a conservative estimate in 2022 for sales tax, and we finished about $125 million over that. We're projecting because of, I would say, because of inflation, and I think some of the pent-up demand from COVID is going to diminish. But as you can see, we're probably going to finish this year. We're projecting about $40 million higher than where we originally intended. Could go up, it could go down, but we have to be cautious out there because while I keep saying the recession word hasn't hit yet, I think we're going to start seeing the tip of the iceberg coming up shortly. I'm not an economist, I don't want to tell you that, but the rainy day might be coming sooner or later. When that happens, we have to be very cognizant that this is the single largest revenue stream within the county, and we have to manage that appropriately. What we've done, you'll see in the upcoming slides, is we've created contingencies exactly for this. So our fiscal position is protected. We fortified it. There's no issues if something goes sideways. We have some money in the bank to cover all these expenses, which is beneficial not only to this body, but to the taxpayers too, and the base out there, that we won't have to do any crazy revenue increases or anything else. So we're being protective of that. For 2023, as you can see, we're still having, we're going to project roughly a $4 million surplus. We're moving some money into reserves as a result of that. But our sales tax is still stronger. Some of our expense controls are still in place. Our direct assistance, which is what I was leading to, was probably the thing that we're starting to see, which is kind of like an indicator that the recession is coming. We're starting to see some higher caseloads in the DSS arena for certain of the social programs. So let's be cognizant. We have to be cognizant of that may be coming up in the 24 budget, and some other things that are out there looming that we don't know about, some judgments and claims and tax certs and everything else, which I will get to. But for the most part, our sales tax is driving up. We got a little bit more in state aid, and some of our other revenues, which I will say in the parks and other arenas, and investment income are driving to keep the budget still balanced and in a surplus position. So, which is the primary role of what we have to do and keep the budget balanced, and that's part of my role. So, again, I'll just go over some of the highlights of 2023. Again, it's sales tax, which if you look at the slide, it's 2% over the 2.6% over the 2023 budget. And it's trending a little higher, but we're being actually a little conservative in our estimates. But ongoing, we monitor it daily. I happen to watch the checks when they come in because I have to hold my breath. There will come some bumps earlier in the year, but it's kind of smoothed itself out. And I think what you're seeing, I think, too, is some of the travel behavior of people. People are staying more local, not traveling as far. And I think that's creating a benefit to us. I think some of the things that the county's offering and some of the things that are out there are making people stay home because of whatever reasons, whether it be hotel costs or gas prices or anything else. You're seeing a few more staycations, which is probably helping us, which is offsetting the part of the housing market diminishing. When the housing market's strong, it's a multiplier effect on sales tax. You buy the house, you have to buy the furniture, you got to buy all the new stuff that goes with it. So we're seeing an offset to that, but I think that's being offset by, I guess, maybe some of the tourism aspects and people staying local, plus inflation. As prices go up, the sales tax number goes up. So let me cover contract negotiations. Contract negotiations are ongoing. We still have 3 collective bargaining units that are outstanding, and we're working through that. I can't say more than that at this point, so, but hopefully we will have some resolutions on the final ones before the end of the year, or if not sooner. So I think I've covered the revenue assumptions for this, what's the driving forces and what the negatives are as far as the revenue side. We have to be very careful, and this is where I tread rather lightly here. Our revenue side is what pays for the bills. So if we start to see some sluggish things, we have to be cognizant that we don't want to go through any monumental fee increases or anything else to cover the shortfall that sales tax may create. So for this year's budget, we will be looking at that just to make sure if we have modifications that need to be made. But I want to make sure that the revenue side needs to be fortified where it's at right now. Let's make sure that we're not doing anything crazy. I will work with this body, of course, but I just want to let you know that that is one of the driving factors is our sales tax number, which is, I know it's a source of sensitive subject here, but we do have to be cognizant that that could go south, and if that does, we have to just fortify it. So on slide 10, the multi-year plan update, we are balanced. As you can see, we've some of our revenue assumptions. Keep in mind that the collective bargaining pattern that we've created sets up the path where these are the years now, because it's 5 or 6 years since we haven't had contracts. These are when we pattern bargain that the numbers go up a little bit higher in the back end years. So when you look, if you look at salary and fringe benefits, we're almost at, in the multi-year plan, we're almost at $1.7 billion. So that's just the result of collective bargaining and what the step increases and everything else. So it's the main force, it's the driving force, but we're doing fiscally prudent patterns that makes the county's fiscal position much better than what it was, and we'll continue down that path so we can maintain a balanced budget and hope our friends at NYFA go away. In the multi-year plan, too, what we've included was rather conservative sales tax growth. Again, salaries and fringes are current with current labor negotiations. Our tax certs have been budgeted, and I will get to that in a little while where we are with the tax certs. But we've also included contingency reserves in the plan as a result of the benefit of sales tax being up, which gives us flexibility, which takes away a lot of the risk that might be out there for our friends at NYFA and everywhere else, and including a downturn in the economy. Our suits and damages we're keeping pretty high, which is good, as I said earlier. One of the things we are seeing is a lot more higher judgments coming out, and we got to adapt to that at this point. So, but for the most part, I would say that when you look at the plan, it's a conservative fiscal plan. It's got some risks, as does every budget, but I will say we're in a good place financially in order to get us to the next step in the next few years, which is what we have to look at. That's why we use the plan as a basis for what we build the budget off of. It kind of is the building blocks. When we go into doing my budget right now, the plan is kind of what we set the benchmarks for the departments and where they're at, and then we manipulate, because the needs change as time goes on. There's certain things that I can't control. Look, it could be one or two things. The last recession, was Katrina hit, I remember back then, and then everything started going sideways. There is always some catalyst that makes the economy turn. What that is, I don't know, but history will tell you that there's some event that will occur that will make the economy slow down. Considering the election cycle that comes up in Washington, that will be a determining factor, which if you look at charts, I will tell you, you see spikes during those years right before a presidential election. So stay tuned on that is all I can tell you. One of the focus that the county executive has made one of his mandates is that we have to look at the balance sheet for a change, which is something we never did. We were just looking to make sure we had enough money to pay the bills. Now we're trying to mitigate some of the risk that's out there. So one of the things we did do, which was been one of the things that was thing that the state offered to give municipalities, they had an amortization program, which meant we just borrowed money from the state to pay our pension bill. We are now current on our bills with the state, and we plan on being current as a pay-go, so no more amortization for what I would say for the pension bill. That's a good thing. It's a credit-worthy thing, so we're very happy about that. The tax cert liability, which I will get to, is approximately $384 million as of the year end. We've paid a lot of money out. We're continuing to work with them, and again, it's still one of the largest liabilities that we have out there, but we are addressing it, and I think over the next few years we will probably diminish that backlog down to a lower number, so there's not a lot of interest payments and everything else. We meet regularly, we meet quarterly probably with the tax cert board to go over where we're at and everything else, and there's some ongoing things with some of the old DEF and new DEF that's being worked out right now that may be used as a resource for additional funding to clean up the backlog. So with that said, I just want to let you know that last year, which was probably the highest year we ever paid out, approximately $200 million, of which there's all different funding sources, but I will say that the Special Revenue Fund has been used to do that. We strive to get the money out the door. I think our best effort will be between $200 and $300 million would be our best, which last year was probably one of the top, to get that money out the door to lower the interest component of it. But that said, it is still a negotiation and a settlement that takes a little time because some people, don't want to settle right away. So we are working through that. For this year, as of right now, because of timing issues and everything else, we've paid out $82 million. We plan on probably hitting the $200 million mark. No matter what we do, we will still have, I will say, cert liability. It's just the fact that we're going to have to do that, because if you look, even with the assessment system and everything else, no matter what we do, we will still be recurring between $75 and $100 million in cert liability, which when you look at the tax base, it's not that big, but now we have the means to fund it and keep it current so that we don't keep this wheel of the 9% and the 3% rule with certs, which is a big component of what some of those largest settlements have grown into. We're mitigating that way. And I'm going to summarize really quickly, which I was brief, I hope I was. Our bond upgrades, we should all take pride in that. That's something, I know to the local person it doesn't mean anything, but to the finance people it means something. So it's a good thing for everybody, and from the administration down to this body. It's something you should all be thankful that you got, and it's an accomplishment is what I will say. We have a very extremely resilient economic base because of most of the stuff that we're doing here is, I would say, in the bio and the medical field, which creates a very good base for us. It's a multiplier effect, you know what I mean? Good health care, good public safety, attracts people to come to want to live here on Long Island. So I think that's something we have to just be cognizant of. Our reserves are the highest they've been ever. We are structurally balanced in the budget. We are addressing the cert backlog, the litigation backlog, and our cash position remains strong, and we continue to fortify our balance sheet. So I know I talked fast on that one, but I'm here to field any questions that this body may have for you, and I look forward to working with you as we present the 2024 budget. So,
Thank you very much. I do have one question. our reserves, our surplus, where is that money invested in?
We do have an investment structure. I mean, we have an investment policy that's guided by the state that we have driven down. We've diversified our cash holdings, if you mean in financial institutions. We've diversified it to protect ourselves. Our deposits by state law have to be collateralized with either U.S. Treasuries or some other reasonable facsimile of that. So we got a little scared, I will not tell you, with the Signature Bank and a couple of the other things, but we were protected from that. And again, we do have collateralization. In 2007 and 8 and 9, when the fiscal crisis was going on, I will tell you, getting collateral, cash became very hard to park with banks because the restrictions that we had. The rates were horrible on them too. You were getting a quarter point and everything else. Now, flip that slide, it goes the other way. We're paying, we're getting 4 or 5% on our money sitting out there on sizable cash balances. So
Banks are paying a fortune on their reserves, so they just didn't want the cash at that
yeah,
point.
well, that was the whole thing with the new requirements when they went through that, which was Basel III or whatever that was. You know what I mean? That was one of the things that the capital within inside the financial firm was one of the things. Our deposits to them, while we give them the cash, they have to collateralize it, so it's not. We don't get the same amount as a retail person in a CD because they net down the cost of buying the securities against the cash that we're buying. So instead of getting 6, we probably getting between 4 and 5. They take a haircut off those balances. So.
And we're prepared for a possibility of a rate decrease at the end of the fourth quarter?
We are ready for it. I will say that much. I mean, it will impact my investment income, but it also will offset because my borrowing costs will then drop too. So you know what I mean? There's gives and takes to how we have to look at it. You know what I mean? And that's one of the benefits we will get is that if rates decrease, that means my borrowing costs go down. And as a result of our, good standings, I will say we're getting very good rates even on the last deal we did. So we're in good place financially when it comes to that. So
Thank you.
no problem.
Any questions from the legislature? Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you tell us, Andy, just the one shot? Even without that, we still have a surplus. Would that be right?
Correct. Yes. Or we have an organic surplus.
And so forth. We're still good.
We will have an organic. That's just adding, I always say a little bit more gravy to the meal. So.
It's great that we're building up those reserves. Who knows? But no, I think you've dealt with pretty much everything I had here. So thanks for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and let me just. We've strategically placed money into the reserves for liabilities that will be coming up, so that the budget, if it can't handle it, let's say a retirement tick, which, if the market goes south, they amortize it in the state pension system, but at least we have flexibility within there. The other thing we're going to do, too, which is a big thing, we're going to retire some debt at some point. That's what we're working on right now, some of the old debt that has high yield out there. It will yield, not only will it have, we take the cash out of the bank and there's that offset and
How much of
everything.
that is eligible for retirement?
It depends what's callable. You know what I mean? We're looking through it. Yeah, there's about $100 million out there that we've identified that we would like to retire, which has higher yielding out there. So we're looking into doing a
And you can
defeasement.
replace that with
What'll happen is I'll get budgetary savings in the upcoming years in debt service,
I'm
which
saying,
gives.
in other words, you plan to not replace that, just pay it out of.
Just pay it, yep, I don't plan on we're not refunding what we're doing, we're just paying it off and calling it, and which is, first time I can honestly say that we're sitting here having a different conversation, but, some of that money we have, there's a plan to spend it, and I want to spend it sooner rather than later, because one of the things is that, we have to look to the future, which anything that we do now will have future impacts. And the unknown, if we retire some debt, it could free up between 7 and 15 million of debt service, which will offset any rising costs that we may have or impact in increasing, caseloads and everything else in DSS and any revenue shortfalls that may occur. So.
Right, now, you're on the cert liability. You're looking to get it decreased within the next year or two down to what? What do you?
Realistically, I will tell you, legislator, it'll probably be 2.5 years, because we can only process so much. I mean, that's what it is. But I would say that By the end of next year, you should see a significant drive down. If you saw, we're down from where we were, even though the LIPA was in there. That was the biggest component. It was in the 600, almost 700 million. But if we're pumping out 200 to 300 and we have 100 coming in, we're netting about a $100 million reduction every year. So I would say by 2026, we should have most of that backlog paid down, maybe before, but that would be my target at this point, so.
Thanks.
Legislator Ferretti?
Hi, Andy and team.
Good afternoon.
Thank you
Good
for your
morning.
presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good to hear a positive outlook. I think the bond rating upgrades are really an accomplishment that we should all be proud of. So, great news. Do have some questions. I have questions about NIFA, but before I get to that, just some miscellaneous questions based on what based on your presentation. With regard to the tax cert liability, so I want to make sure I understood what you're saying. We're paying it down, but at the same time, each year we're accruing about $75 to $100 million in additional tax cert.
Correct.
So if for the year 2023 we're up to about 85 million paid down, that may cover the amount that we encumber for this full year, correct?
Correct.
But you are planning on continuing to pay it down the rest of the year. So if you double that to 170, but you take in 100, we're paying down 70 million.
That is correct.
That's how it works?
Yeah, I just want to manage expectations as fast as we try and get that money out. We do try and work with this. It's a complex web, I will say. But keep in mind that if we're accruing 200, we're paying down 200 million annually, and we get 100 in new liability. We're netting 100. So you can do the math. Hopefully it'll work out. There's not some sideways thing in the real estate market that creates a larger liability.
So
but
not to put unreasonable expectations out there, or to quote our legislator Drucker and I's baseball team's owner, but a 3 to 5 year plan, maybe where we're paying it down, is something that is feasible.
I would say that's achievable.
Yeah.
So.
And just a comment with regard to the red light camera revenue, and I know it's been down. Personally, to me, traffic's never been worse in that. Like, it's everywhere you go, it's crazy. I just think that it's working. I think the red light camera program is working. I mean, the goal is not to make revenue on the red light cameras. It's to get people to change their behavior and stop. And I think that that's what's happening, is people see that there's red light cameras, they're used to it, and they're learning. And so I wouldn't, and I know maybe this is not for now, it's for when we're looking at next year's budget, but I don't think we're going to see an increase in revenue in that, because I think it's the behavior that's changing. And I think that's an indication that the program is working.
I would.
I'm not even asking for a response. Just with regard, and maybe you're not the proper person to ask about this, but the budget for the health department, specifically with early intervention and preschool, has increased dramatically. That was in the year 2023 that it increased dramatically, right? It's
been ticking up the past 2 years as a result, I would say. COVID created a problem in the system, I will say, with some of the needs. We find that some of the preschool and the kindergarten kids need more early intervention needs. We're watching it, we're monitoring it. It's been going up dramatically. There's talk about rate increases and a few other things to the service providers. Keep in mind, we get 56% back on the state from that. So if it goes up, we get, it's a 50-50 split. But we are seeing an increase in caseloads.
Tremendously, from what I understand. And, all right, we can all figure out why. I mean, obviously, with the schools closed and kids not getting what they needed, there's an issue there. Mm-hmm. And we want to, of course, help the kids that need help. But what is the process in determining whether early intervention is needed? In other words, and rather than even the process, what are the amount of applicants that are requesting it, and how many are actually getting it?
That I don't have the statistics on, legislator. I would defer to the health department. But here's the way I understand the process. Preschool, the county is involved more with the process, but it's the school district in where the student resides that make the determination what services they need.
Right.
We have
so the school districts determine when it's us that has to pay for it, but then when they go to actually into the school district, you see the numbers drastically declining.
Yes, I would.
So who makes the determination that the school districts are the one that review what we have to pay for?
I believe it's set by New York State education law.
So the state requires that the school make a determination that the child needs this early intervention. We pay for it.
Correct.
And then when they go to actual school district, all of a sudden the numbers drastically decline.
Yes, I would.
And that's a
Your
state
analysis
mandate.
is something that I've seen, and that's what I will say. We're cautiously watching. There are some things that we're working on with NISAC and everything else to maybe put a cap on that for us, you know what I mean? Meaning like the Medicaid cap that we have out there. But I would agree with that assessment. You know, it gets, you know, you got to be, and I understand this, when the need is out there for the kids, but I also find it odd that it falls off once they become part of the school district's problem, which we all just have to be cognizant of, meaning
Of
our
course,
share.
we want to get the kids the help they need. But the point, look, it seems to me, and I know you don't have the numbers, but I would venture to guess that the amount of people that request this assistance and the amount of people that get it are very, very close
I would say yes.
when we're paying for it.
Yes.
But at the same time, when then it passes off to the school district, the numbers change drastically.
There's a
But-
decline.
But the state mandates that it's the school district, which is ridiculous and backwards. But whatever.
If it were me, I would be honest with you, I just assume give this program to the school districts and say, here's your money from us, and you administer it. But, you know, the problem is, what do we give them and what's the number? You know what I mean? It can't keep going up at the rate it's going up, because it become very costly to
Well,
us.
that's the thing. Now it's becoming the point where if it continues at this rate,
It's going to be a challenge for me,
and I think
is what
that a lot
and
of
for this body.
I mean,
so.
I have small kids.
Right.
The word's out.
Yeah.
The word's out that these county programs are out there, and you can get it for your kid. Basically, just ask.
Right.
you
And
get it.
what I would hope, though, is maybe there'll be a decline. Maybe there's a little bit of a backlog from what I would say from COVID and the kids not being in school. Maybe that will diminish over time. Let's be hopeful. I mean, I know hope's not a strategy, but we also, you know, we have to just be cognizant that this is a real challenge for the upcoming years, which we have to monitor. And we meet regularly on it just to monitor it, because it's a $150, $60 million program in the budget, which is, you know, it's big money. I mean, you know, so look, we want to make sure our kids are taken care of. We have the best school system probably in the country, but we also have to be cognizant that, you know, there are some things that create drains on our budget that we don't have control over, which is not the best thing for us, you
Right.
know, so.
It's just another
Yeah.
state mandate.
An unfunded mandate is what it could be called, so.
Okay, so moving on to NIFA. You gave a report, a very positive report. Now, I also read I know the controller's not here yet, but in her report, she outlines the different ways that budgets are, you got the gap way, then you got the NIFA way, right? So you've reported a surplus. Does your calculation match NIFA's calculation? So in other words, is there a deficit in the NIFA calculation?
No.
Okay, so what is the projection that NIFA has?
NIFR every year does, when I submit my budget, they come up with risks and everything else. I will say, the way the statute works, which, you know, they use the 1% rule, meaning that if they identify risk of 1% or more in the budget, that the control period can still stay in place. I am not forecasting any gap or NIFA gap deficits in the out years. We've built in one of the things which is a positive for.
Hold on. And not in the out years. The statute doesn't say that NIFA keeps a control period if there's a projected deficit in the out years, right?
No, I don't
No,
believe
so-
that. It's
so
the current budget, so.
Let's talk about the current budget.
Right.
Are they projecting a deficit in the current budget?
I do not believe not. They haven't issued their report yet that I'm aware of on my mid-year plan, so I haven't seen it yet. So.
Okay. Well, how about 2022?
Well, 2022, they had come up with a projection. It was probably in the $100 million range. I don't have the number off the top of my head.
Surplus.
No, well, their report, when they did it in October, identified risk when we presented the 2022 or 2023 budget, depending upon which year we're talking about. They probably projected risk of $100 million when they came out with their report. We finished with a surplus of over X number of dollars, so there was a monumental swing between their report and where the results were. Reality. Well, yes, I would say that. So,
Okay.
Look, I'm hopeful between this body and everybody else. I have to deal with them the most. I mean, that's the whole thing. I'm hoping that the control period ends sooner rather than later for everybody.
But Andy, what I'm trying to understand is NIFA has the statutory ability to stay in a control period if the 1% rule is in effect, correct?
Correct.
All right. Is it?
It's arbitrary is the best way I can decide. I don't think it needs to be there.
But what do you mean you don't think? It's a math.
I agree with you. We finished on the plus side. I will say, when you look at in the CAFR, or what the controller is going to present to you, there is a NIFA section in there. The past 3 years, we've been on the plus side of the NIFA calculation, meaning that there is no real need for control period based on results.
Is the control period triggered by projections, or is it triggered by the real numbers after they come in?
It's completely based on a forecast.
So essentially, they can forecast whatever they want and keep control.
Where I was going earlier was in 2022 when we finished, right, NIFA probably projected $130 million in risks. And let's just say we finished with a $300 million surplus. There was a difference of $500 million in their report.
So then they can project whatever they want,
Correct.
and they can continue to be wrong each and every year and still maintain their control period,
Yes, because the 1% rule is an arbitrary number.
meaning it's something they can
It's
base on a projection.
A forecast, that's correct.
So how many straight years have they been wrong and kept control based on their projection that turned out to be not true?
Many.
More than 2?
I would say closer to 4 or 5.
4 or 5 years?
Yeah. I mean, even in some of the dark times when we were going through some bad things, we still were finishing on the plus side. I would say probably in 2019 or 2020 was probably the years that we started finishing with the surpluses, and that's when we...
And speaking of them, what is their budget? What do they get budgeted for?
It's approximately between 2 and 2.5 million.
So 4 straight years of 2.5 million that they projected numbers that kept them in a control period that turned out to be nonsense at a budgeted amount of $2 to $2.5 million a
Yes.
year.
That's what it cost us, you know what I mean? That their statute of limit allows them to take the money before it even gets to me. That's the way it's written with the intercept, so.
Okay, one last question on it, totally off of NIFA. You talked about interest rates, and I'm assuming we're getting pretty good interest on these funds that we have as a, right?
Right.
So my understanding is when a municipality receives interest from money in a surplus, that you have to spend it within a certain period of time. Is that true?
I don't recall that being part of local finance law, but some of the monies that are in reserves stay in the reserve wherever they're at. Anything with the surpluses, we have to start spending it down. That's
Okay,
one
well,
of the
how
things.
about capital funds that's borrowed?
Capital gets into a gray area for us because, the market tells you that you shouldn't use short money for long-term projects, meaning that while interest rates may be high now and you got a 30-year project, you're better off almost using the bond money now. And then as interest rates decline, you take that higher interest rate and you refund it. I mean, that's just the cycle of how things go. So I'm not a proponent of spending cash for capital is what I would say.
So if we hold on to capital funds that have been borrowed for a certain period of time, there's no penalty or?
There are some penalties. Now we're getting into what I would say. There's many components of that. I will say, yes, we are required to spend down bond proceeds within a time frame. I'm correcting what I said earlier because now I understand where you're going with this. We have to spend it within the time frame that's allotted to us. Meaning that if we have a 30-year project and we're sitting on something, sometimes we don't achieve that, but we don't borrow all those funds up front. We borrow it in the cash need basis. If it's a $100 million project, I only need $25 million next year. I only borrow 25. So we try not to have too many unspent proceeds. The money that stays in the bond fund, or what I would call the capital fund, that does create a problem when we're sitting on money now because we have an increasing interest rate environment for cash, and what's happening, the borrowing costs are going up, but we're getting what's called is arbitrage rebate now, which is something we haven't had because rates have been so low. So there are some things that happen with arbitrage, which means there's a difference between the money we're borrowed against and how much money we're collecting in as far as investment income. So we are starting to see that. We'll be cognizant of that. We're working around maybe creating in next year's budget, because we know we're going to have this in future, is eliminating, if we have to pay any money back as a result of arbitrage, we'll put that into the budget so there is no risk to us. So,
All right, thanks a lot.
thank you.
Minority Leader Abrams?
Thank you, Chairman. Hey, Andy, how are you?
Good. How are you, Minority Leader?
Good. I have several questions in a couple of different areas. But I just wanted to start off by just commending you again.
Thank you.
Working over several administrations, you've been steadfast, and I think your responses have been trustworthy. And that's the most important thing you can ask for, for us as a budget director.
I appreciate that.
That you're a steward of your trade, so I appreciate
Thank you.
being able to do that. I agree with you
in many of your components you had indicated in your summary in terms of some of the successes with the county. I do understand, obviously, I think we all agree that we want to see NYFA move on. However, I categorize it as three particular areas, one of which I think the county is doing better in over the last couple of years, but then two other areas, and you tell me if you disagree, that I think the county could be doing much better in, but because we're not, I think that feeds why I think NYFA continues to linger. The first area I think is collective bargaining agreements. One of the things that I thought brought on, you correct me if I'm wrong, that brought on the control period in the county was when the previous county executive, well, two county executives ago, basically instituted that he wanted NYFA to have more control to help him with labor agreements, if I remember that correctly.
I can't answer that. Maybe a possibility. I mean, back then, I think there was, we were trying to give, we were frozen, and I think there was a plan probably to give the unions, I will say, some money, but there was a, I wasn't here to say that he used them as a shield or an assist tool to get that.
That was my recollection.
Could be, legislator, I can't
Neither
answer.
here nor there.
Right.
My point is that those same labor agreements that we asked NYFA's help for back then haven't been finalized yet. We're still finalizing those agreements. I mean, we've had tremendous successes. I mean, the previous administration negotiating the DAI and the SOA, the current administration negotiating the PBA. We are moving in the right direction. I envision CSEA, COBA,
IPBA.
district attorneys,
IPBA, yeah.
IBA, they'll also have agreements very soon as well. So that's one area I actually think we're getting better in. The two areas that I think have some level of concern, one is kind of out of our jurisdiction, but it does have a liability to the county, is the hospital. I haven't heard too much talk about their fiscal situation, other than what I read in the newspaper about it. It sounds to be pretty dire. I'm extremely concerned because obviously, as you know, the financial backing for the hospital falls on the county. Have you had any discussions with them in regards to their fiscal condition? Because I think that is a looming issue that I believe NYFA is going to continue to watch.
Well, all right, so let me break it into two things. One is our liability to the hospital when it was spun off was back in 2000 or whenever it was, the
1999.
successor agreement. Well, the purpose was to back the debt. I mean, that was the whole successor agreement, so our liability lands there. How much is that to us? That's the one component that I know our liability lands at, is about $100 million, which is over the next, till 2029, then that debt gets retired, which is roughly, if you do the math, it's 25 million annually. So that's where we feel our liability. That hospital serves a purpose in this county. We all know that. It serves the indigent community. The problem is it's not a very flavored type of environment for some of the private, so we're in a different place. They are working. I know they have a lot of consultants over there now trying to figure out where they can get money from, revenue streams, cost containment, expanding services with some of the opioid things. So I do believe that, it's going to take a coordinated effort, not just within inside the county. I think the state, too, because some of the things that the state used to provide, this is one, we're very unique, I would say. There's not too many counties that have a facility like this, which makes us unique in New York State, which goes back to the county guarantee. I could go through that. But that's one of the things. So some of the DSRIP and DISH money that we're getting is allegedly drying up, which was a big component of where their revenue stream is. So it's created a structural imbalance inside the hospital because they're not getting the funds in from the state and feds, from Medicaid and everything else. So they're looking at other revenue sources of how they can, some of their billing practices and where they can cut costs and how they can, better keep that hospital afloat. It's in a dire position from a cash perspective, but there's ongoing talks, I will say right now, hopefully to come out with some type of plan that will keep it afloat for at least the next 4 or 5 years, because that's what it really needs.
And I don't want you to have to divulge anything of that you've said in confidence, but would those plans require any state intervention? Because if it does, then I kind of see why NYFA would want to hang around a little bit more to oversee that process.
When you say state intervention, I would say that, money, we're going to need money from somebody. I mean, the county can't afford it. I mean, the numbers you're talking about are significantly higher. The state has to take ownership, because this is one of the things that, I hate to say that, again, we're one of the unique counties that have a hospital system like this, you know what I mean? So, And, there's some things that we have to look at from an expense side. I don't have institutional knowledge. I'm not sitting over there overseeing their finances. I can only tell you that there is an ongoing plan, and there's been a lot of meetings lately to see what we can do to get the hospital back on good fiscal ground.
And
So,
the last projections I saw, and again, I'm getting my information from Newsday, so I'm not saying that it was 100% accurate or not accurate, but the last report I saw was that the hospital is going to run out of cash by sometime next year.
it's a
That's still accurate?
it's a possibility,
That
yes.
sounds more than dire.
Yeah,
It sounds
it's dire.
Titanic.
I
It's
agree.
sinking bad.
Agreed.
fast.
I'll be honest with you, and I understand your position on knife. I don't know if knife is going to help or hurt, if they should be doing anything. It's not that, I would say if they're going
I
to
don't know
say
if they're
anything.
going to help or hurt. What I'm saying is that NIFE is a state agency, and if the state is going to have to infuse some level of cash, I don't see that either because they got their own troubles in the state. But that being said, if they are going to infuse their own level of cash, then that adds more credence to NIFA being in the vicinity of what's going on. And not because it's the hospital to NIFA, it's because the hospital to us, the liability that it creates to us if the hospital, like say for example, describe to me what would happen if the hospital was to run out of money next year, is not able to pay their bills. What triggers after that?
Well, first of all, they can't go bankrupt because it's a public health corporation. It's not legally not an
Do
option.
we have to step in and start paying their bills?
No, our liability, where it lands with us is we only have to guarantee the outstanding debt. Now, is there I would
So
say,
say, for
a
example,
social,
they
is there
can't
an,
pay their debt. They don't have the cash. They can't pay their
yeah,
debt.
so we would step in and help them out. So
we would
you're
pay
asking
them,
me.
we would, right.
So if that were the case, then we pay $20 million out of operating funds or whatever it was over the next few years, and I have to account for that in my budget. That's where I would say our liability, it ends right there, according to the success agreement. Now you're asking me, we have county residents that are going to need services. We're going to have figure out a way to keep that place afloat, because that's, from I would say a legal/fiscal perspective, we have limited liability when it comes to the hospital, but we also have a socioeconomic thing that we have to keep that place, all right?
we all
and
agree.
you know what I mean? So I think it's a fine line that we have to provide these services to the people. It's a question of how and who's going to help us, because it shouldn't all be on the burden of the county for some of these things,
I agree.
because some of the things, except by
actually think
state and federal.
We should be looking to private sector too as well.
One
Should be
thing-
shared, absolutely. I
And
totally
keep in mind, I will say that, there was some shenanigans this year in the state budget, pardon my analogy of that, but, the EFMAP thing became a problem here because the state is now intercepting money that should be coming to us. So that's one of the things I will say, that the state is using some monies that should be coming to us to help fund that through some other forms of healthcare. So there are things that I think the state has done to penalize, I think, a lot of municipalities. This is one of the ones that may hurt the hospital, as is the DISH and the DISH RIP money. That's their two primary revenue, because it's all indigent care, and that's where it comes from. And with rising healthcare costs, that's what's going to keep making the problem even worse. So,
Well, look, Andy, as I said before,
Yeah.
just keep us posted. If
I-
you have an
I-
update during the budget process
I-
later on in a few months, let us know. If there's any updated projections in terms of when their fiscal cash situation is at, please let us know.
Well, I
Because
definitely
think-
will.
I think that's a very big looming issue. It's been, and to be fair, it's obviously, I'm not trying to disparage the current administration. This predates, this goes back like 5 administrations.
yes.
So that's not my issue at all. But we talk about NIFA leaving, which we all want. That to me is a big issue. The next issue I do want to talk to you about is the tax certiorari's. And you've described the liability really well. But the one thing I wanted to ask you about was the current liability. You had said that the current liability, we continue to add $75 to $100 million a year.
Yes.
It's funny you say that number, because that's the same number I remember when we actually did the first reassessment, was $100 million a year. So if I'm understanding this correctly, and maybe my 21-year career is in vain, it sounds like to me we've done multiple reassessments, but we are not improving on the current liability being reduced.
Let me answer that a little. To your point, yes, you would think it would be vertical, but the problem, based on the size of the the assessed value and everything else, when you think about 75 million, I think that our assessed valuation is $6 billion in this county. It's such a small piece of that. We're never going to have the roll 100%. We
I
can,
get that.
we're never going to be right because there's many reasons as to why and how and what. But remember, it's somewhat subjective. So the fact that it's staying at 75 to 100 maybe is a good thing because it means maybe the roll has got a little bit
The
more
roll
defense.
because it could have ballooned, you're saying, much higher if we did nothing.
If we did nothing, then which is kind of how we ended up where we were back then. We were burying the cert liabilities, thus the infusion from NIFA. We've gotten better because we've done these revals. The question is how much and how often do we have to reval? I wouldn't answer that. But the fact that it's stayed in that range, I mean, you got to give kudos to that because it hasn't gone up. Because when you look at it, that's really, if there's an off year and you have a downturn in the market, that's why I think there's a little flexibility from 75 to 100. But I think that the process in itself is always going to create liability. And that's just the way it
No,
is.
that part I get.
Yeah.
So I guess you touched on something, but you said you couldn't answer it. I guess we have to find out during the budget season when we actually bring in the department. But we do want to know when we're going to get back to the point where the rolls are not going to be frozen. Because obviously we don't want that number to start to balloon up again and the liabilities that's added to the current liability starts to increase. But you wouldn't know the answer to when that will happen.
No, but freezing the rolls does have an impact on the liability. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. I don't think it's always better. I think it gets worse as we freeze it. But I think unfreezing, there's certain things I'd rather have a roll that's dynamic and keep moving so it doesn't create the cert liability. But I don't know, sometimes the way the process works, the liability is going to build because sometimes our counterparts on the other side don't want to settle the cases right away.
I know.
So you get it. The
that
3%, there's a 3% and a
totally-
9% ticker. So I think there's
I just don't
benefits to
wanna
that.
if we can lessen the new liability, that's where I'm focused in. I totally get what you're talking about with the existing in terms of the nuances with dealing with some of the property owners. But
Yeah.
the newer liability, obviously, that's the stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I know there's a conscious effort by assessment and ARC and the treasurer's office and the county attorney's office to get the class 1 and class 2s out there because they have the most benefit. The class 4s are going to become a problem now too. We have to at some point. The commercial real estate market is going sideways since COVID because of the split time and shared workspace and everything else. So, I don't know what the future is going to look like. I really don't. It seems to be coming back a little bit, that people are going back. So the occupancies in the commercial real estate market are diminishing. But, I would imagine that some commercial properties in the next 10 years probably will convert over to be residentials. And, we'll switch the roll class from a class, a lot of class 4s may roll into the class 1s. So it's just a result of the time we went through with COVID, and I think it just changed the commercial real estate market, as you can tell. So,
Got it. Well, I don't have anything further, but thank you again.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
appreciate
Hartley.
it, and
Thank
you to your team.
thank you.
Legislator Drucker?
Thank you, Chairman. Andy, thank you for your presentation. It looks, from the speed and fluidity of your presentation, you can tell this is not your first rodeo, huh?
Thank you.
But for someone like me who's a lawyer, I struggle sometimes with some of the financial stuff, so I do need your help on certain things. Starting off, you said this was the 4th year in a row of a surplus, so this started in 2019, 20, and 21, correct?
22. So maybe it's
22 is now is the 4th year.
right. Yes.
So there were 3 prior years where there was a surplus?
Yes.
All right, so that was under the current administration. Talk to me, can you give me a little brief lecture on unassigned versus assigned fund balance and how you determine which is which?
Okay. I'm gonna give you but I'll defer to the controllers if you want to save that question. Unassigned and assigned. Unassigned fund balance is money that's free and clear for use, for us to use, with a caveat. That will trigger NIFR if I use fund balance, which is the most ridiculous part of that statute, but I can't argue that because that was the determination by the court that, fund balance is taxpayer money. It should be given back, but if you use fund balance to plug a budget hole, it'll count against me in the NIFA gap. So unassigned fund balance is basically money that is, I will say, fungible and can be used. Assigned fund balance comes with restrictions, meaning that We have money assigned for different things, pension costs, litigation costs, other things that it becomes restrictive in how we can't really spend it that freely. So that would be the two conditions, I would say.
So which one does NIFA get their feathers ruffled on?
Well, they can't get their feathers ruffled on anything unless I try and use fund balance for like if I wanted to plug it as a revenue source. You know what I mean? Because that's really what fund balance is. It's you have money in a bank account that you're going to use to plug up the budget. In other municipalities, and I've had experience having used that, I get to use that just as a placeholder, but it triggers the NIFA gap with them because it's outside. There's two things that trigger. One is that, not having a structurally balanced budget, and if I do any borrowing for any operating funds, which we haven't done in years, so we've gotten away from that practice. So that one I can take care of. I don't plan on using fund balance in any of the upcoming budgets, but do realize that that's the trigger and the dynamic I have to work through when I'm sitting, oh my God, look, I got this money sitting in fund balance, why can't I use it? But that's the reason, so.
Just wanted to piggyback on the minority leader's points about the hospital. I've been advised that the minority has requested the majority to have a public hearing on the hospital's fiscal situation. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, is it possible that we could, I think we would all benefit if we could perhaps schedule a public hearing so that the hospital could come and talk to us about their fiscal situation? I think we'd all like to see what's going on and learn what their projections are. We have requested that from the majority. I would hope that we could perhaps discuss that.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Andy, can the rainy day, this may sound like a stupid question, can the rainy day fund ever be used to give a tax reduction to our taxpayers?
No, because of two reasons. One is things are going to get slimmer in the out years. So as I cautioned about where we are revenue side, our collective bargaining agreements are going up. We're not going to be structurally balanced if we start cutting the revenue side of it, which is going to keep NIFA in the fold, which is what the problem would be. So, we're strategically placing reserves for the unforeseens out there, not to use to offset revenues coming in subsequent years or diminishing revenues of future years. So
I think the philosophical difference between how you determine the budget and how NIFA sees it is based on, NIFA seems to always be using the catchphrase, recurring revenue in the out years. What are we faced with in the out years? The hospital, litigation, tax certiorari, bonding, requirements. So I think they're always trying to hang their hat on recurring revenue, the ARPA funds that we get. So I think that's really a conceptual difference between how you do your job and how NIFA tries to hang on to their job. Do you agree?
I would agree with that, yes. We have some philosophical differences based on some other structures in the municipal world out there. So.
Okay, so you arrived at a $383.4 million tax certiorari liability. How do you get to that number? Is that judgments after SCAR? How do you get to that specific number?
As complex as the assessment system is, as is the liability calculation, they do a revaluation every year to calculate where they think what the value of property should be. It's a complex formula. I don't want to diminish it anyway. It's almost like an actuarial type of formula where they figure out what the number is. It's then audited by our auditors, which I'll defer to the controller on that. But it's developed through ARC, and we look at the numbers, because there's many different components of the things. There's the judgments that are outstanding, the interest component, there's AR 70s, AR 90s, and a whole bunch of things, but then there's also a revaluation that they do kind of to come up with what they think the difference in the current roll is to the new roll. And that's what creates the liability number. So it's not as easy as saying X plus Y equals that. There's many components that add up to that.
How are we trending in that number?
Well, it's as we pay down some of the backlog, you'll see. I think by next year you'll see that number, if it gets down under the $300 million range, which is what we're striving to, maybe even less, then you will see that we've made a significant stride. And at some point, the liability will either be between, let's say, 150 and 200 just on an annual ongoing basis.
Well, I mean, this is piggybacking on Legislator Ferretti's point, too. You know, each year, we reduce the tax cert liability, but yet we're also increasing the obligation, too. But as we get a more defensible tax roll, theoretically, the liability should be coming down. And that might allow for a greater disparity between what we're paying down and what our recurring liability is. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. I think one of the things that I think the minority leader brought up was, why is it stated 75 to 100? And if I had a better defensible answer, I just think that when you look every year, if it went up, we had a lot of moving parts this year. We settled LIPA, which was a big thing. And we started paying back some of the backlog with money from last year. So I think it's still fluid right now, is what I will say. But I think if we know that that's what we have to do, then we have to figure out ways to fund it. That's why we're using some of the monies that we've squirreled, I will say, surplus money, to offset. We do owe a lot of people money here. That's one thing we have to realize. It's not that it's free and clear. We do have liabilities that are very sizable. Our OPEB liability is one of the things, the tax cert liability we're working on, but there are other things out there that are generating problems. So I think I'm comfortable with saying 75 to 100. I mean, if I'm wrong, shame on me, but I don't think it's going to be, historically, it was always a couple problems here. One was overtime and the other one was certs. So I think we got the overtime piece controlled, and now we're controlling the cert thing, which are the two big drivers. So
I think all of us up here on both sides feel fairly confident in your ability to project and forecast these things. One of the items I was looking at, Andy, what is the Protection of Person Fund? That was one of the items.
yeah, if I had it's in the financial statements, so I don't want to. That's where I don't do it that way. It's based on programmatic budgets. Protection of persons, I do believe, it's got to be public safety, but I would defer that to the controller, because that's what the component of it is. It's a program that I would say encompasses all public safety people, so meaning police, corrections.
I saw a category for it, and I said, what the heck is that?
Yeah. They report numbers differently than you or I. I mean, the CAFR in itself is a complex book, for lack of a better thing, so there's a lot of things and nuances that mostly only the accountants of the world and people who do this, when you look at it, would understand, but it's a programmatic budget. Programmatic budget is what I would say.
Now, this is similar to my earlier question about the number for tax cert liability. The litigation fund you have is $341.9 million. That's your litigation fund, right?
I don't know that number. It's in the CAFR. I don't have that.
Yeah. So that,
Yes, that is correct. I'm sorry, my team just handed me.
Can you just explain how you got to that number?
What we did, what the practice has been. I mean, remember when we did the NIFA refunding, we squirreled away money. We created the special revenue fund for things such as tax cert liabilities and litigation liabilities. We modified it. So it's set up for two things, really two things. One, it's set up for general litigation funds, meaning that regular tort claims that we're going to get in, which if I had my druthers, I'd ask for tort reform, but I'm not delusional that will ever happen. The second thing is to fund the tax certs. So it's two components. So it's split. I would say majority of it is approximately 200 or more than that is probably dedicated to tax certs, and then the balance is for general litigation. Now, what I've come up with, and this is what I plan with the program with the county executive, is if it affords me the appropriation at the end of the year, meaning if I have excess cert money and I have excess judgments and claims, which is general tort claim money left over in the budget, as much as I need to not create a deficit position, I plan on rolling in to fund future liabilities. So I will keep it's a rolling, I'm going to try and keep that fund rolling, just so that if the cert liability gets sideways on me, I don't have to borrow or do anything crazy with it. So.
Gotcha. And then my last question, do we as a legislative body, get a separate report each year on your reserve balances, or is that just all lumped together in budgetary process?
We account for it differently than the controller does, but in the controller's year-end results, that's where we get the numbers from. You know what I mean? It's a separate section of the annual financial statement. But, you know, we have a budgetary way, she has a GAAP way. We operate on two different methods, which is going to go into this whole accounting thing, which I don't want to confuse everybody with. But we do keep track of them. I mean, we do. But, you know, remember, we've only started this practice over the past 2 years, so it is new to us here, and we do know that we have to start getting rid of some of this money because it has future savings, like with debt defeasance. That's the best thing we could do, because that frees up. Not only does it relieve obligations that we owe to bondholders, it gives us more flexibility in the budget by paying down some debt. The other things we set up probably is just the unknowns. I mean, healthcare is a big unknown out there right now, I will say that much. And the way the stock market's behaving, I don't have I don't know if next year's going to be the real one where we get socked by the controller. Even though they don't really hit us too hard, when the market declines, they amortize the decline over a 5-year period, so that's what we do. We've had years, that's how we ended up borrowing from the state when they had the amortization program. That's why most municipalities did that. We have now set a path up if that does occur. If I put $100 million in for pension costs and it comes in at 110, I now have a reserve to offset that, so I don't have to cut services to keep the budget balanced. So we've strategically placed money into the places that we saw risk to mitigate that risk for the future. So,
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for the fine work that you do.
thank you, legislator.
So, one last quick question. When you were talking with Legislator Ferretti a little while ago, you said that if you have a $100 million bond and you only require 25 now, you'll only borrow it in tranches as you need it. What happens to the interest rate on the additional funds as you borrow them?
I'm trying to think how I can count. The interest rate on the borrowing is going to fluctuate from what the market conditions tell me. So if we do a project that's $100
That's
million,
how the bonds are structured?
they're structured, but we may not borrow the full amount of the cash for the project. If we have a $100 million project, let's just say whatever it is, I don't want to use family
Whatever,
math.
it's a long project, whatever it is.
Right,
It's
so
a 2-year project, and you borrow $50 million at 2%.
And then the next-
the rate environment is now 4%.
Correct.
The re-
That's correct. So I'll borrow 50 at 4%. So I have to offset those costs. So we come to it with you with a bond ordinance for the total amount of the project, because that's what local finance law requires us to do. But the borrowing, the cash flow borrowing within that project is determined by DPW and us to see what we can fit into the budget based on our budgetary needs. So
All right, thanks.
thank you.
Legislator Ferretti?
Andy, just some follow-up with regard to the hospital. You alluded to it, but you didn't really put a number behind it. The state has essentially stripped funding to the hospital since 2020, right?
Yes, and it's either the DISH or the district payments. I don't know. They did take some monies from sales tax a couple of years ago to give to disproportionate hospitals. I
But
don't.
you're saying like some money. My understanding is it's like $80 million a year.
Significant.
Well, that's more than significant,
Oh,
right?
huge.
I mean, $80 million a year since 2020. It's reportedly over $260 million that the state has essentially defunded the medical center.
I would say yes.
Okay, so it's no mystery why there's a problem here, right?
No, I would say that when your revenues and expenses don't match up, what's going to happen? You're going to create a deficit, which is going to create a cash burn, and that's exactly what's occurring now.
All right, but it was suggested a few minutes ago that perhaps NIFA should stick around, I think was the word used, because the state may infuse money. I'm not really sure I see the connection how NIFA would be part of that, but even if they were to have in some way assist in the state not defunding NUMC, just to be clear, whether NIFA has a control period or not, NIFA is going to exist for the foreseeable future, correct?
Yes, just based on because we have outstanding debt obligations. So
Right,
that's
so
what
even if there was some way that NIFA was to assist in bringing the money that the state has defunded the medical center with back, whether they have a control period or not, they're there, right?
yes. You know, I don't want to mix the two. I think legislation was changed this year, and I'm not, don't quote me on this, but the hospital now became part of NYFA's oversight. So in the past it wasn't, how it has become. I segregate us from them because I only have limited liability from the position where I sit. We only owe $100 million in outstanding debt. The way I understand the liability is that we only owe 100. But that said, we do know that we have a moral and social obligation to help the needy people, so I think we'll be involved
Well, so
somewhere.
does the state.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
we
agree.
are doing it.
Yeah.
Right? It's the state that's taking the money away.
They've basically have stripped out a revenue stream that they need. That's what they've done.
80 million a year.
That's significant.
Right. All right. Thank you. Since 2020.
Yeah, it's recent. A couple things. One, I think it's a little disingenuous to talk about the state taking away the money without talking about the right reasons why the state did take away the money. The state took away the money because, as we all know, the hospital has been in fiscal shambles, not just for the last 3 years, for the last 20. So from that standpoint, the state plans to give back the money when the hospital gets its fiscal order in place. I mean, Legislator Ferretti, you full well know they have been in shambles before 2020. You know that. So to insinuate that they took away the money and that's what's creating the deficit is a little bit absurd. But that being said, we're not going to go down that path. The other thing that I did want to talk to you, Andy, about, which did come up, well, I brought it up because you brought up a comment that didn't make much sense. What I was talking about, I wasn't talking about, in essence, whether or not NYFA has to want to stay around, or what I want them to stay around. I was talking about, from the standpoint, they might have to stay around because of the legislation in terms of now they're encompassed into now, as well as any potential infusion of money. So before comments start getting placed about whether or not I want NYFA to stay, or let's just be honest with what I said. What I said was that they might have to stay around. So let's not start to mix things up. And I just wanted to clarify the point on the record, but I'm sure you'll have a counter to what I just said.
Not a counter, just when you're saying stay around, I think that's what threw me off. They are staying around whether they're in a control period or not. And that was what I wanted to distinguish. With regard to the 80 million, I'm not really, I'm not going to sit here and say that the medical center has been in great financial shape for 20 years, but I don't see a solution to fixing a problem as taking away additional money and setting them back even further, much further, $80 million a year further. That's not the answer, in my opinion. And if we're going to start anywhere in trying to fix it, we need to lobby the representatives on the state level that were behind defunding this money and reversing it, which I think we agree on because you're talking about infusing money from the state. So that's what we need to do. That's step one.
I think, Legislator Ferretti, I'll end on this point. I'm not to try to go back and forth. This is the reason why I believe we need to have the hearing in the legislature. You have great questions. You bring up great points. Our side, I think we have the same questions. If we can somehow have the hospital come to be able to present their fiscal situation so we can get a much clearer picture, I think just because of the back and forth you and I just shared, I think it's imperative that we have this hearing. And surely, if the budget office could be a part of it as well, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely. I mean, we're here to support whatever needs that are out there and, you know, address any liabilities that we may have even with the hospital. And, you know, we're going to figure out something that, you know, we all need to work together on this one. I don't think it's an independent thing. I think there's a lot of multi agencies that need to be involved to rescue the hospital. And it's not just going to be here. The state, the feds have to step up with some money too, I think. So I think we all have to be cognizant of that. So.
Thank you. Any further questions for Andy? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time and effort. Hopefully I was quick, even though I speak fast. I know that's a problem for some people here.
I now would like to invite Comptroller Phillips and her team to come up to present.
it's okay.
Just leave the power on too.
What happened to Legislator Gopal? I got my act firm. I'm ready. I'm ready.
This is the package they have, so if you want to see on the right or the left.
Oh, yeah. Just, let's put that there. I got a lot of stuff here. Well, Betsy, I may pull this over to you a little bit. What is this?
Oh,
Is this
somebody
somebody's?
left
Andy? Somebody? Jeff, can you grab this? Arthur, how are you? A little martial arts, you know? It's a good story for a woman my age, so it's okay.
And then you want to golf tournament.
And then I want to golf tournament. First day my foot bothered me, second day it just bothered me. Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
This and this. I brought so much stuff with me. Let's do this. Hey, Arnie, how are you? I'm good, thank you. I'm really good.
I didn't finish all the percentages according to what
Oh,
Lisa
no,
told me.
don't.
But
don't.
it's going up since 2019. That's what's
It's
going
just 30 to 35%.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
going up more.
You're sorry, what? Oh, you're causing problems over there. Takes all kinds. Jean Gregorio, that's gonna be my hardest thing. No. They're a good team. Michael has water. It's kind of sad not everybody's here.
You want to sit in that chair, with your armchair? I'm going to move that around for you. To be more comfortable.
want to sit
Sitting
in?
in
No.
the armchair?
Good,
Are you
thank
sure?
you.
Chair too?
Yeah, yeah.
Because there's an extra one here. I could just move that if you want. Are you more comfortable with it? Here, you want it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Thanks. Just move this one down. Okay,
Thank you for joining us, Controller Phillips.
thank you.
Ready to get started?
Sure.
Already.
So first, I want to thank the entire Budget Committee for inviting us today, to the Chairman, Legislator Jean Gregorio, Legislator Ferretti, Legislator Copal, Legislator Abrahams, and Legislator Trucker. I also want to, closer to the mic, gotcha. I also want to thank my team, because today doesn't just happen, as you well know. Deputy Controller Betsy Hill, who's in charge of our accounting division, the Director of Accounting, Lisa Sikoris, and I have a whole team behind me who are here in support and are willing to answer any questions. So you have a packet which will allow you to look through the presentation, and it is on your left side. I'm going to recommend you pull out the sheet behind the presentation, because we're going to get there. That's your little cheat sheet to talk about budgetary reporting versus GAAP reporting. And then on the right side is just the actual mid-year report that we published, and we sent you via email. So, like Andy, we're going to talk about what a strong fiscal position that Nassau County is in. And really, thanks to everyone's hard work here. We had surpluses in governmental funds in fiscal years 2019 through 2022, which is 4 consecutive year-end surpluses. In 2022 alone, it was a $435 million surplus as of GAAP reporting. And as you can see, the rating agencies have reflected and have noticed the fiscal position that Nassau County is in. We're going to go into a little detail. And this kind of looks at the larger picture. So you can see through 2019 through 2022, we have total revenues, we have expenditures, excess revenue over expenditures that may be positive or negative. And let me make a point there also. You can see in 2022 that expenditures were 40 million more than revenues. But that's positive, okay? It says we paid it out of reserves. We're using reserves. There's no reason to continue to tax the taxpayer if we need to use those reserves. So we have our total other financing sources, which is basically borrowing, net change in fund balance. We take that net fund in fund balance every year to come up with a 2022 fund balance at year end of $1.5 billion. Now, I mentioned that little cheat sheet. So let's take a quick look at it. We talked about this last year. So you'll see on the far left the 5 major funds. This is what the administration uses from a budgetary accounting. It includes the general fund, police headquarters, debt service, fire commission, police district. You'll then see right below that the NYFA calculation. Then what you see is the 3 operating. So this is GAAP reporting. So the GAAP reporting includes retirement contribution reserves, any type of employee benefit liability reserves, litigation, open space, and so on and so forth. So it's a more comprehensive way of looking at Nassau County. You'll see, I mentioned the 2022 $40 million, and I want to highlight, in that $40 million expenditure, remember, we paid tax certiorari liabilities, payments were made out of reserves. No revenue stream, so when you pay out of reserves, on a GAAP reporting basis, you don't take that money in as revenue. So there's an expense, but there is no revenue source, but we had the reserves. We paid the deferred pension liability. I think Andy mentioned it, $123 million in 2022. There was $30 million remaining in 2023, which has been paid off as of February. And we had the retro longevity payments that we paid in 2022. I just want to take a second and mention NYFA at this point because I've probably been the most outspoken about the fact that NYFA should not be, or Nassau County should not be in a control period. So according to the law, NYFA may declare a control period upon determination that one of 5 stipulated statutory findings has occurred, or that there is a substantial likelihood or imminence of its occurrence. And I can tell you that Nassau County does not meet any of the 5 stipulations. And in fact, according to NYFA's own calculation, sorry. Yeah. It's page 220. Yeah, good. Sorry, it's small print. I'll go from 2019, according to their own calculation, Nassau County had a $76.8 million surplus, 2020, $90.6 million, 2021, $27.2 million, and in 2022, $79.7 million. And keep in mind, NYFA's calculation does not include reserves. So we don't meet any of the 5 statutory findings, stipulated findings. The multi-year budget has been approved, and I'm going to, at the risk of getting involved in a conversation that I wasn't asked to get involved, I'm going to address the hospital also. So as Andy clearly stated, the only financial liability that Nassau County has is the $100 million of outstanding debt, of which it's about $21 million from 23 to when it is retired in 2029. That is including principal and interest payments. And no matter what happens to the hospital, we cannot pay off that debt any earlier. So there is no risk of Nassau County having $100 million, even though we have $100 million in reserve that we could pay this off, but there is no risk for us having that. That debt accelerated. Thank you, Betsy. The other thing I just want to clarify, there is a difference between control and oversight. We are all understand until that debt matures, there will be oversight by NYFA. We're talking about control. NYFA can have control of the hospital, but that does not mean that NYFA has control over Nassau County. We should be in a control period. So I say this truly respectfully of all the individuals, professionals that are involved in NYFA, but it is time to let Nassau County out of control. So we'll look at the projections that the controller has for 2023 in a minute, but I do want to do a quick overview of the economy because it really is important on how we come up with our projections. If you look at Nassau County versus New York State versus the United States on page 4, slide 4, you'll see the median household income in Nassau County is over $126,000 per year versus New York State at $75,000 and the U.S. at $69,000. In fact, Nassau County's median household income is ranked the 7th highest in the United States. The good thing on the other side is our families below the poverty level are also the lowest here in New York State also. We have 5.8% of families that fall below the poverty level in 2022 versus New York State at 13.9% and the United States at 12.8%. Unemployment has remained consistently below the state in the United States. 2022, it was 2.5%. We jumped up slightly to 2.6% in May. That could be a blip for the month versus New York State at 3.9% and the United States at 3.7%. So we are a wealthy county. If you go to page 5, we look at GDP since 2020. We did have the 2 quarters in 2022 that went negative because employment was so robust. There was no declaration of recession, and 2023 is looking fine at 2% and 2.4% in the first and second quarters. So you ask us, what makes us concerned? And it really has to do with the Fed. So if you turn to page 6, the blue line on page 6 is CPI, the inflation rate. The orange line is the federal funds rate, which is how they control. They lower Fed funds when they want to ease and open up borrowing. When they want to control the economy, they tighten, they raise the Fed funds rate. The dashed line is their targeted inflation rate. So you can see that inflation spiked. It's been coming down, and in fact, as of June, it was 3.09%, very close to their targeted 2%. But the Fed continues to raise interest rates. And the risk here is really that they raise interest rates too much. Larry Kudlow did that years ago. They raised interest rates too much. What happened? It was more and more expensive to borrow from the residential side. Mortgage rates skyrocketed. From a corporate side, companies stopped growing because they couldn't afford the financing costs. So this is, the Fed has been clear that they want that 2% targeted inflation rate. They've slowed down. We're seeing 0.25% interest rate increases, but it's something that we're going to be looking at closely. The next page, page 7, really tells you what we're forecasting for 2023, and we won't go through all the tiny print there. We'll go through some highlights of where we see risks and opportunities, but from a bottom line, on a budgetary basis, we are forecasting a surplus of $103.7 million. On a GAAP adjusted, on a GAAP reporting basis, not including GASB 87 and 96, we are forecasting a surplus of $95.3 million. So Lisa will walk us through some of these major opportunities and risks that we see versus the budget. So Lisa, please.
Good morning. So as you can see from this table, these are the primary or the key drivers of the risks and opportunities that we identified in our report. The largest, and you'll see it's the first one on here, are payroll and fringe savings. And the Comptroller's Office has consistently excluded any budgeted information or any budgeted numbers for any unsigned collective bargaining agreements. Reason being, we don't know what those terms are going to be. It would not be prudent for us to guess and forecast something that we're not sure of. So we always remove that. That's consistent. We've done that over many years. The other big driver are the vacancies. The way that we project is we take the onboards and project those costs out. So those are the two factors that are driving these large variances. Some of the variances in here, and you can see that in the actual report, you'll see are comprised of different categories. Savings in salaries, savings in fringe, offset by some higher overtime costs that we're projecting.
Slide 9.
Thank you. Okay, so the next one, oh, I'm sorry, you could see, yes, you could see on the next page, you'll see the variances will comprise the different categories right there for the 93.8.
So the next category is sales tax, and I'm going to take this one because I like the scenario analysis here. So I'm going to have you turn to page 11, which shows you our scenario. Where we're in our forecast, we are forecasting a $70.8 million opportunity in sales tax in 2023. And the way, in collections, thank you. And the way we get to that is we take what we've seen actual to date, so real numbers through July, and we're adding a 2% increase over the 2022 actual numbers for the remaining half of the year. And where we got that 2% is we looked at what has happened in the first 3 periods, first 3 months of 2023. Actual sales tax are up 4.5% over 22 actual numbers. And then in the second, third 3 periods, we saw they were up 3.9%. So around 4.2% year to date. So is $70.8 million difference from the budgeted at actuals plus 2%, or is $88 million? I mean, it's a forecast. It's going to be somewhere. We believe it's going to be somewhere in between there. But let's look at the downside. What happens And I'm going to show you some cyclical numbers in a second that probably would prevent any of this downside. But the fact is you see on the far side of the scenario chart that say actuals to date minus 4% of what we saw in the second half of 2022, we still have a positive budget variance of $19.4 million. And in fact, if you go down 6%, you're still slightly positive over 2022. All great numbers. Go to the next slide, page 12, because this is the trends that I just referenced. And don't worry about which trend is which, because there's a lot of lines on this chart. But I think what you want to look at is just how they all kind of go in tandem. So the May through June, you see a spike in sales tax revenue. June, July, kind of things go down and kind of hover around. And then in August through December, in every year, we've seen a spike in sales tax revenue. You know, back to school, holidays, you know, Halloween, Christmas, all the different holidays. So there really has been no year where we haven't seen this trend. And I'm going to ask you to go to page 13. Page 13, the actual budgeted amounts since 2013 are in the orange bar charts. The blue line is the actual sales tax collected. So you can see, with the exception of 2021, because of COVID, in 2020 and 2021, we've really kind of been around where we've budgeted. But I think the point we're trying to make here is the rating agencies, since day one that municipalities have used sales tax revenue in their operating budgets, they have thrown up a red flag and said, you know, we're concerned about sales tax revenue. But this chart really indicates that sales tax revenues don't vary that much here in Nassau County. I mean, we've been anywhere from 2013 to 2018, anywhere from the $1.1 billion to $1.2 billion, $100 million variance. Not that much on a budget our size. And then in 2019, I'll remind you that New York State passed the enhanced internet sales tax legislation, which required online sellers to charge New York State sales tax. Then we had COVID, and now we seem to be around that $1.5 billion. My guess is we will be around that $1.5 billion plus inflation. We then went back, and we don't show you this, we went back all the way back to 2008.
Yeah, but I didn't include the preemptive.
Yeah,
Okay.
We went back, that's details. We went back and said, what percentage is sales tax in our overall revenue pie? And the fact is, it ranges anywhere from 31 to 36%. So I just want to kind of clarify every time the rating agencies say, but they're using sales tax revenue in their budget. Well, yeah, we're using sales tax revenue in our budget because it is revenue that is proven to be consistent.
Do you want me to mention sales to the rating agencies, how they think about it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, in my experience in the municipal bond market.
Get a little closer.
Okay, I don't know, is this on? In my experience in the municipal bond market, it's always been an issue that sales tax was less reliable than property tax. Property tax goes back to the 1800s or even much earlier, but sales tax is something of the 1900s, and so it was sort of new. There were changes over time, but most significantly, I think, is that when you have a built-out area like Nassau County or New York City, the sales tax are pretty consistent. The problem has been in more rural areas, and I can remember some bond defaults, particularly in Colorado, where a Walmart moved in and they got all this sales tax, so they built a new county recall. And 10 years later, Walmart left, and they had to default on the bonds. So it's really something that doesn't affect an area like Nassau County. It's more in the rural areas where they have that variation that goes on.
And I'm going to give the county executive and the county administration a shout out here. You know, with what the development that's going to happen at the Nassau Coliseum, what's happening south of the UBS Arena, what may happen when it comes to NYU Langone, this is all positive, really great economic drivers for Nassau County. So I'm going to turn it back to Lisa, and we're going to go through some of the other opportunities and risks.
So now when we go to investment income, we have an opportunity, we're projecting an opportunity of $54.8 million. And I think it's not a surprise to anyone based on the Fed funds rates going up like 11 times since March of 22, and the cash balances that the county is holding. We took basically a run rate is what we looked at. However, we did take a haircut towards the end of the year as more expenditures are being paid out, particularly pension. Since the pension is current at this point, we don't believe that there's a decision at this point by the administration on taking any further amortization. So we took a little bit of a haircut there, but we believe that there's an opportunity of about $54.8 million. Rents and recoveries, what's driving the $37.8 million in opportunities is the receipt under the SANS agreement of 54, offset by some additional risks that we've projected in one of the items that's always in the budget are the disencumbrances. Those are not revenue because it's just an obligation that's being eliminated. So it's not a true revenue stream. And so we eliminate that. That was approximately, that was approximately almost $6 million. And then there's, sale of county property. We don't include until it's actually closed. The project, the sale has closed. We also have a $25 million opportunity in contingency because at this point, based on our projections, we don't anticipate that the county is going to need that $25 million. State aid is projected to have an opportunity of approximately $19 million, and that's mainly due to higher STOA money for the bus operations and some state reimbursements on early intervention and preschool costs, in addition to some of the DSS programs, which we know things like safety net and daycare, and we'll talk about those expenditures a little bit later. And we're projecting a positive 12.7 opportunity in debt service, and this is based on delays in issuances, and we utilize the amortization schedules of the current debt to come up to that number. So we're very confident in our debt service projections at this point. Let's talk about some of the unfavorable risks. Okay. So we're going to start with property tax refunds. You'll see there's a negative $80 million there. And that's mainly because when we present our projections, we are including the reserves in our numbers. So, as the comptroller stated earlier, you have a real expenditure, but you don't have a true revenue stream because you're using fund balance on that. So, yes, we're projecting the $80 million risk. However, we believe that any payments coming out this year will be fully funded through the reserves, through the DAF as well. Now we'll go to departmental revenues, which has the next highest risk.
Slide 15.
Thank you. And similar to what the budget office had stated earlier, we're projecting a risk in some of the real estate fees, GIS tax map, mortgage and deed recording. Those are the big drivers of that risk, and that's primarily, again, no big surprise due to the slowing of the real estate market. We utilize run rates and look at historical trends to come up with that information. The other big driver is the $5 million that was budgeted for the income and expense law, which we understand is still pending. And then some other small fees back and forth that give us the total net 41.2 risk. Okay. The next slide, fines and forfeitures. So we're projecting a risk of $21.5 million in that category, mainly driven by TIPFA fees. We see that the trend of the collections is not coming in as budgeted. There is always an opportunity if collections pick up that those numbers would be coming in lower, or a lower risk, I should say. And then we've also risked the full $3 million for Boot and Tow, as we know that initiative has been on hold. And the school bus camera, we took a haircut on that because we know that at least one town has implemented the program, and the funds that the county would be receiving are much lower than I think what it was initially anticipated. Okay. The next category is early intervention on the first page, 14.4 risk. And this is, again, primarily due to higher caseloads than budgeted. I think this was the early intervention preschool. This was discussed earlier as well by OMB. And we're also anticipating a $6 million opportunity in state aid for those funds. So the net would be approximately an $8.4 million fund balance effect. Social services, we are projecting an $11.7 million risk. If you look at the slide on
17.
page 17, you'll see that there are multiple drivers of this amount. We project shortfalls in recipient grants, purchase services, and emergency vendor payments, and with the latter two due to an increase in the demand for daycare and higher TANF costs and safety net assistance caseloads. And again, we receive a portion back on state aid for that information. We're also looking at the trends in Medicaid, and based on the trends, we're seeing that there could be a possible $22.5 million opportunity there. Okay.
So, in summary, and I'm really stealing this slide from OMB because it's true. Think about it. Bond upgrades, strong and resilient economic base, highest general fund reserves in years, structurally balanced budget. We're addressing the tax cert backlog. We have a strong cash position, and we're strengthening the county's balance sheet. So, hats off to you, hats off to the administration for, getting Nassau County in the best fiscal position we've probably ever have been. I'm going to ask for a few more minutes of your time because in the Comptroller's office, we are spearheading the project to replace the financial system. So I kind of have you captured right now. I thought I'd have more of you. So if you will bear with us for 2 or 3 more minutes to talk about Nassau Forward, because it probably is one of the biggest initiatives that Nassau County has done in years. So, Betsy, please.
So Nassau Forward is the project to replace the existing financial software system, which no longer meets the needs of the county. We're fortunate because we are the executive sponsors of both the county executive and the county comptroller, which is critical to make this a success. In June 2022, Anna Sousa joined our team in the comptroller's office. She's got years of experience with the county, which makes her an excellent project manager for this project. In July, after Anna joined us, we started.
Yeah, a little closer.
Okay. Sorry. In July, Anna started working with us. Is that working?
Did you turn it on? Yes.
Okay. All right. In July, we started working with the consultant, Plant Moran, which was selected by the prior administration, to develop the needs analysis, the market assessment, and the RFP, and they'll also help us through contract negotiations. We plan to send to you the needs analysis and the market assessment as background for when you are going to be asked to approve the vendor that we select next year. Gartner is also another consultant who's helping with us in the RFP and on input on the contract issues, and they will be our project manager for quality assurance once we have the vendor and the implementer in place. The town of Hempstead has recently been through an implementation, and they've also given us some good advice as well. In September, we brought the consultants to Nassau County, and we had a large kickoff meeting with all the major departments that are working with us. And of those involved, we've continued with interviews through many months, and it took 36 county agencies and departments working with us, 210 employees, and 3,100 hours of work to develop these reports that were necessary for this project and to build the knowledge we needed. We also have a steering committee, the project steering committee of 7 voting members with 5 non-voting members of senior county executives representing the various departments are the majority use of and support of the financial software system. So they'll help us ensure that this project gets the right attention it needs. They'll oversee the project development and the vendor selection and the implementation of the new system and help us when we ever run into a hitch. They already have approved the RFP, which was previously approved by the Software Selection Committee. Now, that has already taken place, and in July we released the RFP. So we're moving along. We have a Software Selection Committee, which is 11 members who are daily users of the NIFS system, 6 technical advisors who use the software or are in IT or in purchasing, and 3 non-voting members who are helping with the RFP process. From now on, we'll be selecting the implementer and vendor through the RFP process. Those individuals could spend up to 184 hours through January when we hope to make the final analysis per person to complete that process. Once in January, when we've selected, then the contract will move to legal. It may take several months before they can work out the issues between the vendor and the implementer and Nassau County. But during that time, we need to start engaging backup people to what we call the subject matter experts or the functional leads, many of whom were people on the Solution Selection Committee, and they will be involved in the development of the plans and the implementation of the project, and they will almost be working full-time, most of them. We've estimated there's about 16 that will need to be involved in that, and they'll be working many hours starting in June and beyond. So that gets us to hopefully an implementation starting sometime in 2025.
It's a big project, and I'd like to thank Betsy, Anna, and really every department in Nassau County, because as she has indicated, to get us to the RFP process, just to get us the RFP, it took months and months of hard work, dedication to map out the procedures of Nassau County so we could make sure that the RFP is a comprehensive RFP and will meet the needs. I'd also like to say it is critical, and thank you to the support of the administration, that we have people dedicated to the implementation of this project. I believe what happened, I wasn't here, but the last time we went through this process, the commitment on behalf of personnel allocation just wasn't there. And, we don't have a choice in this. We're using a financial system that was put in place in 1999. And I'm kind of looking at Kavan right now because you're there. You get it. You know how antiquated a system like this is. And the patchwork that the county has done to keep the financial systems in place is commendable, but it's time. It's, hopefully will be my legacy that I leave for Nassau County. Any questions?
Thank you. Legislators? Okay, if we're ready.
Elaine, good to see you.
Nice to
Controller,
see you,
thank you
too.
for your in-depth report, as always. Very informative. Thank you to your team. I'll be pretty quick. Just, you know, you made some comments about the NIFA control period, and we've had discussions before about this, but I think you did. Can you just tell us again the 5 criteria you went through?
Sure, I can read them to you. So the county shall have paid the criteria for control. Number 1, the county shall have failed to pay principal and interest on any of its bonds. Obviously, that's not the case. Number 2, the county shall have incurred a major operating fund deficit of 1% or more in the aggregate in the results of operating during its fiscal year, assuming all revenues and expenditures are reported in accordance with GAAP. The county, number 3, the county shall have otherwise violated any provisions of the act, and such violations would impair the marketability of the county's bonds or notes. Not the case. Number 4, this one's long, so I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. The county's treasurer's certification at any time at the request of NIFA or on the county treasurer's initiative that on the basis of facts existing at the time, the county treasurer cannot make the certification that securities sold by or for the benefit of the county in the general public market during the fiscal year immediately preceding such date, and then current fiscal years are satisfying the financial requirements of the county. So basically, we can't pay our debt. And number 5, if in regards to the county's financial plan covering the county and the covered organizations, the county fails to make the required modifications after reductions in revenue estimates or to provide a modified plan in detail and with such time period required by NIFA.
All right, so, right, so
Well,
what you're talking about, like 15 years ago? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So just going through those 5, I'm trying to understand, and I know obviously you don't represent NIFA, obviously, but what? I mean, this is statutory. There are 5 things, any one of which could trigger a NIFA control period to continue. Correct?
correct.
What are they claiming out of those 5 things is triggered? Because it sounds like this is not disputable.
I'm going to let NIFA answer that
Okay, so
question.
they haven't
So,
indicated which
you
of
know,
those
I
5.
I will say based on rebuttals to me in
Right.
NIFA, in Newsday, that they want to look at the multi-year plan again. But
Okay,
it's
so-
kind of a, you know, it's a wheel now.
And again,
They've approved the multi-year plans.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, because again, it's statutory, so there are 5 trigger elements there. They're not elements, but there are 5 things that could trigger a statutory control, a NIFA control period. And I know you paraphrased one of them. I don't see anything in there that says a projection for years in advance, unless I missed it. No, right? Number 2 specifically, if I heard you right, can you read number 2 again?
Number 2. Number 2, the county shall have incurred a major operating fund deficit of 1% or more in the aggregate in the results of the operation during its fiscal year, assuming all revenues and expenses are reported
Okay.
in accordance with GAAP.
And that was incurred, right?
Right.
Not will incur or could incur, but incurred, meaning there was a 1% deficit.
Well, but let me make a clarification, just so we're clear for the record. It's the NIFA may declare a control period upon determination of one of 5 stipulated statutory findings that have occurred or that there is a substantial likelihood or imminence of its occurrence. So that gets in the multi-year.
But that's okay, so essentially it's just a poorly written statute, because then number 2 says incurred.
Correct.
So how can you have something likely to have incurred,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Artie, am I?
Is he what?
No, that's not after, that's before.
Yeah.
So what it's saying is, if it's likely
believe
to
so.
have incurred, it doesn't make sense. So, all right, basically it doesn't make sense. But the bottom line is, it seems like everyone concedes that none of those 5 elements are met. None of them are triggering, you know.
And I'll
everyone except for NYFA
remind
concedes that.
the legislature that Nassau County's liability for NUMEC, for the hospital, is $100 million of debt outstanding. I am talking about purely financial liability. Social is another issue, but the financial liability that we have, it's $21 million until 2029, and no matter what happens with the hospital, we are not obligated. In fact, we can't pay that $100 million off early.
But even if we could,
Well, we
we
can.
have the money to do it.
We have the money to do it.
We have the money to
We
do it,
can,
so-
but we aren't allowed.
I understand we're not
Yes,
allowed,
yes.
but we're not underwater. We have the money
Right.
to do it if we had to, right?
And then we do have a contract with the hospital to provide medical services to the county jail.
So what recourse do we have? I mean, this seems to me to be an obvious power grab, just control grab by NYFA, who shouldn't be in control, and seems to be defying the statute. I mean,
You know what?
do we have any?
No, legal action. I'm not a lawyer,
Legal
so I'm going to look at you as a lawyer. There's legal action. And you know, I said it last year. In fact, I think I did some comparisons last year of other counties in New York State. We are so far better off than New York State, as was mentioned earlier. Needless to say, the county or the state controller is estimating $12 billion, deficits in the next couple years. I just can't explain why they're here in Nassau County. There are so many other municipalities that are in a totally different financial position than Nassau County. And I say that respectfully to the professionals that are on the board and that work there. There's some really smart people there. But
Well, it's
Nassau
almost-
County should not be
Yeah,
in
I mean,
a control.
It's not easy to get to the point
Oversight
we are,
is
and
fine.
this crosses
Stay
over
here.
multiple administrations and all of us. It's not easy to get where we are. And,
No,
and we're in
you
a
did
pretty
a
good
great job.
financial position, and we're being told by this oversight board essentially that we're not, and it's just not true.
It's not true.
So, all right.
It's just not
But
true.
anyway, thank you for going through that statute with me. I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's on your, it's in your
You're welcome.
transmittal.
You know,
Thank
just so you know, you did receive the ACFR. It's in the transmittal letter on page 9, just in case you want to go in and make a copy of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Minority Leader?
Thank you. How are you, Comptroller Phillips?
Good, thank you.
Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I guess because I feel like I'm one of the older ones, but I guess in terms of my tenure, I'm on the older statesmen here. If I remember correctly, and I totally agree with everything that you just brought up, but if I remember correctly, the repeal of the home energy tax, whether politically you liked it, didn't like it, but when that repeal happened, it created and touched to the 5th point that you talked about in triggering the control board.
Okay.
The problem is, and I totally agree with Legislator Ferretti, though there are mechanisms that are created to trigger the control board, there is no mechanisms in place to dissolve it, which to me would warrant, I would think, if the administration got our side to a comfort level on some of the issues that we had been talking about today. We talked about the tax surcharge, we talked about the new
Right.
liability. Obviously, we talked about the hospital, and I envision there's going to be some level of discussion in the next couple of months on the collective bargaining agreements. We would be willing to talk about how a mechanism that could be created, that could be done bipartisanly, that we could support, that would dissolve NYFA. We all are in the best interest of dissolving NYFA. Everybody wants to be able to do that. But at the same time, we have to have some type of level of comfort, which I would think you would agree, that we are working in a bipartisan fashion. And they're going to continue on these issues I view as the last remaining
Yeah.
issues that are there. Whether sales tax goes up and down, and I know Andy brought it up, or whether inflation or recession, that's something every municipality has to govern through. That's not new.
That's right.
But some of the issues that I'm talking about, tax certiorari liability, it's been around for, when was that, 1939, 1938, since we've been reassessing off of that number? Yeah. The
County guarantee.
the county guarantee, the hospital has, ever since they spun off into the Public Benefit Corporation since 1999, and should have sold it to the county should have sold it to them for $1 instead, made them pay it back for over $100 million. That was a mistake. So it just seems to be those lingering issues, which if they could be resolved, we'll be happy to talk. But I think those issues are there, and we have to figure out a way that we get past them. And that's kind of what I wanted to get your thoughts on. Do you agree in that capsulated type of thing that those issues are still of concern to the county or should be concerned to the county? I know I
Yeah.
talk a lot.
Yeah,
about
no,
very
that's
long-winded,
okay.
so this is rephrased.
So I was really pleased to hear Andy talk about the tax certiorari liability. The ongoing is there, the 75-ish type $1 million. You made a great point. We've done some, I think, great analysis on how the tax shift occurs and who gets impacted and how it really occurs that we can talk about at a different
that's not what I'm
different
talking
meeting. But to hear the fact that in the plan that past liability is being paid down, and we see it happening, I think is a real step forward to what you're addressing. The hospital, I'm just going to keep repeating myself, and this takes nothing away from my feeling on a social standpoint. But the fact is the liability that the county has is $100 million.
Yep. I agree. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Just real quick. So I agree with Legislator Abrahams that there's nothing in the statute that dissolves the control period. But I haven't read this in a while. I think the last time we talked about this was like a year and a half ago. But
Yep.
if I remember correctly, the statute does trigger and end the control period if none of those 5 things are met.
I think that they're obligated to eliminate it when they no longer meet these.
Right. So
When
so
they
the
believe they no longer.
Say again?
I think it was, it's been a year since we read it too,
I'm
and
pretty
we
sure
were
it
very
says-
focused on
It
this.
says that if none of those 5 elements, I keep calling them elements, they're not
Yeah.
elements, but if none of those 5 trigger mechanisms can be triggered, in the statute, that the control period ends. So, like, there is a that's it. Like, it should be ended. All we're dealing with, and now I don't want to get on a soapbox, but it's like you give especially in New York State, one of these agencies control of something, and they never want to give it up. You see that we saw it with COVID, with the Department of Education, like all this stuff. And this agency has this constant power grab and control grab that they have over us, and it's not clear in the statute. I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but none of those 5 things are met. That control period should statutorily be over, and they shouldn't be able to just unilaterally make stuff up and, to continue this control period. And I would argue that it's over.
Well,
The statute says if none of those 5 things are met, it's
Item
over.
number 5, item number 5 relates to the financial plan, which is your multi-year plan. And they have also approved that, we have in the minutes, for at least the last 2 years, so that was the one thing I think
That's
was
the
the
wheel.
sticker, yeah.
That was the issue they were bringing, so.
I know, they say
Yeah.
that it's, right, so it's not over because they say it's not over.
I believe it was last year that Governor Hochul set aside $2.7 billion for state hospitals. I don't know how much money we received, but there's billions of dollars of our state tax dollars going to support hospitals. I can only hope that that money is coming to Nassau County also.
Sure.
Control, are you a part of the same, Mr. Persis mentioned that there was ongoing discussions in terms of bringing some type of, hopefully, some resolution to the hospital. Are you a part of the, are you?
No.
No, you're not a part of those discussions, okay. I didn't know, he mentioned they, I didn't want to, I didn't want to force him to divulge. I didn't want to put him under a light.
No.
In a dark room, or waterboard him or something crazy,
No.
to try to get him to divulge. But he just seemed like, he mentioned a they. I didn't know if you were part of that day. Okay.
No.
If there were no further questions?
No.
Thank you very much. This will
Thank
come
you.
to the public comment. Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to make a comment?
Is there anyone left?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
This
you.
hearing is
Thank you
closed.
very much. Yeah, great.